It's a pleasure to be back here at the European Parliament, this time as the guest of Knowledge for Innovation and the European Internet Foundation. This is my third visit here and speaking opportunity, and I appreciate it very much because it's a great chance to continue to observe and understand and learn about what's happening in Europe and offer some observations and suggestions from Silicon Valley and the Stanford Engineering School about areas where I think Europe can improve its competitive position globally in the areas of innovation, industry, science, technology, and research. So I'm going to offer a few comments here on a very specific topic, which some of you may find controversial. A little bit about myself. I believe my bio is in some of the papers. I am based out of the Stanford Engineering School, specifically the Mechanical Engineering Department. I have a PhD in Mechanical and Electrical Engineering and also an MBA. And my PhD research was in the area of artificial intelligence. So I have a strong background in AI and deep software engineering. So some of my remarks tonight are going to reflect some of that background. So what I'm going to focus on tonight is basically a discussion of one of my core theses about some of the things that Europe is not getting. I lecture on European innovation and entrepreneurship at Stanford, where I teach an annual course. I spend many months in Europe doing public talks such as this, but also going inside European corporations, universities, and government organizations to see how they're actually operating in their business processes, their thinking, their mission, and doing diagnostics and assessments of institutions, regional and national economies in the areas of entrepreneurship, innovation, and design. And so I'm going to be offering to you tonight some of my observations and conclusions of my work in Europe over the past 5 years. And I would very much appreciate honest pushback, meaning criticism, if you disagree or can offer contrary evidence to some of what I'm going to be discussing tonight. And the core proposition I have for you is that my conclusion is that Europe, with a couple of small exceptions, does not get software. Now, I'm not saying that Europe can't write software, that Europe doesn't write software. You have some very good software companies. What I'm saying is that Europe as a region, from a government and industry point of view, doesn't really understand the strategic importance of software around innovation and has ceded, by and large, the high ground in software to the United States. And that you confuse digital and IT with software. You confuse the two. They are not the same. Software is a very specific area of information technology and digital technologies which deserves your specific attention. I do not see enough attention being given to this. And I'm going to give you some very concrete examples by way of evidence for this conclusion. And I've come to this theme through some very early conversations in Denmark, where I was doing a project assessing the innovation ecosystem in the Jutland region, where I happened to meet with one of Denmark's top policymakers in the area of science, technology, and innovation. Asked her, what has Denmark learned from Finland when it comes to software? Where is software in Denmark's national innovation strategy? And her response was, and I quote, "Software is not traditional Danish," unquote. Meaning we don't have software pulled out as an explicit part of Danish innovation strategy. And I think today that's still largely true of most European countries, perhaps with the exception of Finland and maybe the UK. Now again, I'm not saying that Europe doesn't have some good software companies. I'm not saying that Europeans can't write code. I'm not saying any of that. You've got Skype, you've got Spotify, SAP, autonomy. Europe has grown a few very good software companies. I'm talking about at a very strategic level that you've not really developed yourselves as a major software region when it comes to the important areas of software, which are consumer and enterprise software. And so there's also a great deal of confusion here about what software means. There are really three major categories of software: embedded, consumer, and enterprise. Embedded is what goes inside machine tools and equipment. Then there's enterprise and consumer, the really high value, high velocity, so innovation speed, innovation dynamic sectors are first consumer and then enterprise. Those are the multi-$100 billion industries which are dominated by the United States today, which have brought great benefits to Europe, but I think also represent lost and missed opportunities. So I'm going to offer some specific evidence for what I mean by Europe does not get software. And I'm just going to run through a list here. So pardon my reading the list. The chronic, again with a few exceptions, small exceptions, the chronic late adoption of new software by both consumers and enterprises, new software products. European enterprises, for the most part, again with a few exceptions, are usually quite late in adopting new software technologies around enterprise software, generally do not integrate them deeply, and are very conservative around the use of enterprise software systems. The management of information technology at many, many European country companies is not done on a strategic level. The IT management function in many European companies is relegated to an IT manager or director, not to the chief information officer. That position does not exist at many European companies. Whereas at many U.S. companies, the CIO is really in the senior management, senior leadership of the company, along with the chief technology officer and the CEO. In many European companies, that IT management function is pushed down to more of a functional level rather than being used at a strategic level. The outsourcing of ICT software development to consulting firms by many, many European corporations, to Ernst & Young, KPMG, rather than having a dedicated software team in-house that develops a lot of its own software and that integrates this. The absence of dedicated enterprise software architects inside many European corporations. The role of the enterprise architect is essentially to stitch together, to make sure there's an architecture for all the software systems inside the company, and make sure it's all integrated in a way which is consistent and supportive of the corporate strategy. Many European corporations do not have a single enterprise software architect. There is also among many IT managers in European corporations, again with some exceptions, a huge degree of paranoia about use of social media, for example, to support the business functions such as sales, customer support, and marketing. Business schools today across Europe, for the most part, do not teach software as a strategic corporate competency that can be used to leverage long-term and near-term competitiveness. Most European business schools, if they teach a course related to software, is around e-commerce. So essentially how to build shopping sites and eBay. In other words, 10, 15-year-old concepts. So business schools are not educating, again, new MBA students, new management students around the strategic use of software inside companies. Let's see. Today there is no single operating system on the market that is European. Symbian was really the only significant operating system that came out of the European industry as an attempt to provide a mobile operating system to counter that of U.S. companies. With the decline of Nokia, Symbian is gone, so now we're basically back just to the U.S. operating systems. There is today no European tablet company. It's the Americans and the Koreans. The major company failures you're witnessing today, Nokia is probably best known, but I would also include Vestas, so Denmark's leading wind turbine company, are essentially corporate culture failures, the failure of corporate cultures that are based on hardware cultures, the failure of these company cultures to understand the fundamental strategic importance of software. There is today in Europe only one major enterprise software company known as SAP. A very good company, but again, just one out of many. So that is some of my evidence. Let me just offer to you some of the diagnostics and then costs my diagnostic as to why this is the case, and I'm still trying to understand exactly what these issues are. And I offered some of these observations yesterday at my keynote speech at the opening. Europe is still very dominated in its thinking by hardware. I think this comes out of the German university and engineering traditions. European culture tends to value physical things and artifacts as the real source of value as opposed to software. And this causes European companies, but also European governments, to discount the value of software, particularly consumer and enterprise software, as a source of national competitive advantage, both in industry, in universities, and in governments. The lack of a strong hacking culture. So in Silicon Valley, hacking is something that we view as quite positive. It's how a lot of companies were built, generated. Apple came from two hackers, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. The absence of hacker cultures in Europe, with a few exceptions, such as around Helsinki, a bit in London, maybe in Germany a little bit, is also one of the reasons that Europe really has a difficult time with early adoption, but also doesn't have a strong software tradition. So this is the evidence I'm offering. What are the costs? Well, there have been multitudinous studies conducted over the past 10-15 years about the growing divergence in productivity between U.S. and European corporations, specifically around the adoption of ICT, ever since the introduction of the Internet. These studies have been done at the national level in the UK, in Germany, many other European countries, and yet, and this divergence continues to today, and yet you do not see any efforts in European business schools, again, or in European corporations to really address this gap in ICT productivity through the accelerated adoption of enterprise software systems or the more strategic use and integration of software and software teams into corporate management. And so the cost here is major losses in productivity of European corporations, going back at least to the last 10 years. And as a result, the loss of potentially what could have been tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of jobs, as well as the absence of the inability to generate very large levels of new value and capital for European industry. Essentially what Europe has done over the past 10, 15, 20 years through a number of independent actions is pulled out of its national and pan-European innovation system the software innovation system, which today drives Silicon Valley, which drives most of the innovation in Silicon Valley, which provides the engine for growth in Silicon Valley because the software sector builds the most new companies, generates the greatest new value, generates the greatest amount of profits and investor returns, and is the fastest innovation sector. All of that gets regenerated, recycled into new software companies, but also into the rest of the innovation sector in Silicon Valley, including the hardware sector. So this is the cost of not having a vibrant, strong software innovation system. And I'm distinguishing here specifically between IT and software. And this is an area which I think European governments and industry need to start focusing on. If you have a hope of maintaining your position globally, but also catching up to the US and Asia, I think everybody's been a bit surprised by how strong Samsung and the Koreans have come on here in the last 4 to 5 years around tablets and mobile. No one would have ever guessed 10 years ago that we would be facing Korean companies here and who are replacing European companies. If the Koreans can do this, if the Korean corporations can really understand that software is king, not hardware any longer, so can European corporations. So I look forward to your feedback. This is an area which I think EU innovation policy can think more explicitly about correcting and addressing in its various elements in digital agenda, other parts of EU innovation policy and programs. I'm not completely familiar with what Connect is doing and some of the other directorates represented here this evening. So I'm operating with a little bit of ignorance around this area, and I look forward to additional information or correction. But this is something that I think deserves the attention of industry at the highest levels, as well as policymakers at the highest levels here in Europe. And so I believe we're going to hold questions until after.
Hold them a minute.
Yeah. And Harry, in some of his comments next, may perhaps offer some evidence that supports some of my points. Maybe not. We'll see. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.